Okay. Good morning. Okay. I'm not a morning person either. It's all right. So, hey everyone. My name is Jeff Strauss. I've been doing this speaking thing for about 10 years, and this is my first Stir Trek. So, thank you for having me. Who else is at their first Stir Trek? Wow, dude, all right. Who has been to all of them? Anyone? A couple people, all right. So who's been to other conferences other than Stir Trek? Meetups, place to go, just in general, place you go learn. Yeah, sweet. So when you go to these kinds of places and you sit down or you read a blog or you go to a session, you hang out, you spend an entire day or sometimes 2-3 days a week at a conference like this, how often do you find something that you've learned something really exciting, that you're really stoked and you're excited to learn something new? Hopefully more than that. Okay. How often, though, do you learn something and hear something where it's like you feel like your brain is going, my thing stopped working? Well, wait a second. There. Like your brain is going to explode. Does anyone ever feel that way? Like mind totally blown? It's okay if you don't want to raise your hand. I'm not going to be asking you guys to raise your hands for the whole next hour. I feel this way a lot. I feel this way a lot. I go to a lot of conferences, read a lot, probably do a lot of the same things that most of you do to learn in an industry where things are happening and changing all the time very quickly. And usually I go into an event or I go into reading an article or I go into learning something new and I think I'm smart. Right? I start out thinking I'm a smart guy, I know how to do things. And then usually I leave and I think, oh my God, I don't know how to do anything. How on earth are all of these other people so smart, know all of these things, I can never keep up, I'm never going to be able to handle it. And for me, and I think for many people from time to time, it's more than that moment of oh my God. What I end up feeling like is I very frequently feel like I've walked into a brick wall. Straight into a wall. Maybe it's just me. But it's a very difficult, tangible feeling where you feel stuck, you feel paralyzed. What I want to feel, right, what I want to feel when I learn something new is I want to say, this is great, I read this thing, it's so exciting, I get to go do something new, we're going to do amazing new things, build amazing new stuff, and everything's filled with sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and cat photos and whatever. That's how I want to feel. That's how I think we many times feel like we should feel, but usually I don't. Usually I freak out. And it's worse than that because sometimes I'll walk into a situation and I'll be thinking, this is great, I'm going to go learn the new thing. I hit that wall, I say, oh, and I go to turn, and now all of a sudden, what was clearly an open path behind me is gone. Or at least I feel that way. So I say, right, and again, it's very, very tangible. And we use a lot of words. I'm going to talk about language a bit here in this talk. We use a lot of words for feelings like this in English, right? Things like I hit a wall, or a hurdle, or a stumbling block, or a roadblock. We use words like that because it does feel physical. Sometimes we actually feel paralyzed, like we know we could learn this thing, but sometimes it can be so overwhelming. Or there's so much to do. Or something external in your life that isn't necessarily about work, something's happened and you just don't know what to do. You feel stuck. But really, this feeling is just adversity. Right? Adversity. It's something we all deal with at certain points in our life, either professionally, personally, both, sometimes all of it at the same time, and it can be difficult. So what I'm going to talk about is adversity, the challenges that we face in our lives, and some of the things that I have learned to do over time so I know what to do when I don't know what to do. First, a story. I like stories. I got to stay in this box, so if I start to wander, someone say, hey, get back in the box. All right. So many, many years ago, this was not my first career. I'm actually an attorney. I'm actually still a licensed attorney. I haven't practiced law in 13 years now. But when I was in my mid to late 20s, objectively speaking, life was awesome, right? I had a good education. I had a law license. I was married fairly young, making a great living. Everything looked great. And you know what? It wasn't great. I was miserable. I hated just about everything I was doing. Intellectually, I thought the law was fascinating. But thinking about doing what I was doing for the next 60, 70 years of my life, because lawyers, by the way, never retire, like, ever. They, like, die at their desks. And literally, there was a partner in my old firm who basically died at his desk. So I decided to do something different. I decided to start over. What's the natural thing for a lawyer to do when they want to do something different? Obviously, become a computer programmer, right? I still get asked about that. Why that? It's like, well, it's what I was interested in. And there's more to it than that, right? Because actually, when I was younger, as a kid, I was building computers. I was tinkering with technology my whole life. So it wasn't random, right? I started out in my undergraduate with a computer science and electrical engineering degree, but I got away from that. Like a decade. But here's the thing about starting over is you have to go home. I was married already. You can tell your wife, hey, I know we've got all this stuff and it's really comfy right now. We're looking forward to, yeah, I'm going to throw that away now. Start again. What on earth am I going to do? And I did it for several years, and I got to be pretty successful. I had a good job. I was making a decent living again. I was doing something I enjoyed, and I still felt it wasn't enough for me. So I decided kind of to start over again, and what I actually did is I bought into a business. Company called Arana Software with Jay Harris, who's actually here in the room today. Some of you guys may know him. He's speaking here today as well. Because my entire life, I felt like I was supposed to be like a business owner. I'm from a family of small business owners. That's what I always believed I needed. My goal was, I'm going to own a business and do this thing, because that's what I'm supposed to do, and that's what I want. And I did it. I went and I bought into half the company. Things were great for a while, and I was starting over again, learning new roles, not as a technical person, but like, how do we run this business? How do we sell services? Trying to kind of climb our way up to the mountaintop. And I thought I was on my way there until I wasn't. And it was precipitated by, like when you own a small business, business comes up and down, there's challenges there. But I also realized, like, it was hard on my family. It was hard on me. So the thing I thought I wanted my entire life, it turns out maybe I was wrong. So I exited the business, and now I'm doing the thing that I thought I would never do, and I work for like a 5,000-person company in a small group, but in a massive company, in a corporate place, doing like executive consulting. Something I never thought I would do. And it's great. Right? Like, it's a good job, and it's never the thing I thought I'd find myself doing. Now, so I've had a series of kind of starting over time and again, but here's the thing about that. First off, those are like professional starting over, right, which is important. Also, this is voluntary. Like, I did this to myself. This was challenging, and there were difficult times, but I did this to myself. Now, contrast that with Mr. Harris, who had another different thing. So, like, briefly touch, and some of you may, if you know him, may already know this story. Jay, right around the time that I was coming into Arana, he's my age. He's you're older than me now for the next couple months. We have kids who are the same age. They were very young children. And his wife was talented, an attorney as well. And she was on her way to a meeting one evening. And he got a phone call while he was at a JavaScript meetup that she'd been in a terrible accident and she'd died. So that's obviously entirely different. It's a whole different thing. And I got a front row seat to all of that pain, right? It's one of my closest friends, business partner. I got to watch that every day. And it was hard. It was hard on him, hard on his children, hard on his friends and the community. People rallied around him, but it was a difficult time. But something really, really amazing happened as I watched. He's a tough dude. His family is tough. And over time, what started to happen is I started to see like new things rise from the ashes of that horrible tragedy. And I started watching and I thought, like, A, I'm proud of you, because I don't know that I could do that. But also, I started paying attention to what he was doing. and the steps he was taking, and the way that he was getting through the pain and supporting his kids, supporting a business, supporting himself. I started watching the things he was doing, and I realized, in a weird sort of abstract way, a lot of things he was doing for this personal tragedy were not all that different from the things that I use and the strategies I employ for professional starting over times. A lot of the same stuff. Very different circumstances. So I started thinking more about that, and I started thinking, okay, well, maybe there's something to that. And so when we talk about adversity, I said language is important. It's important to me. You know, when you get to pick the word for a thing, when you get to define the thing, you get to take control of that thing in a lot of respects. So I actually usually don't think about adversity or talk about adversity. I refer to adversity as actually just being transitions. They're just transitions. They happen all the time in life, right? And we say, oh, I'm going through a transition right now. Well, that doesn't sound painful necessarily. We know it can be hard. It makes sense, right? Because by definition, transition means like the death of something old and the birth of something new, right? That's hard. Death and birth are difficult, often messy, just like adversity and challenges. And so I started thinking about transitions and watching the transitions I was going through my professional life, the transitions that Jay had to go through in order to recover from this thing, and I started building out my own idea of like a mental framework. Like, we're engineers. Who in this room is, like, for your main job, like a software developer, an engineer, an architect? Most, right? So we have a certain kind of, like, we like to build things. So I started thinking, well, maybe there's like I can build a framework around this for myself, so that when something happens next time and I'm surrounded on all sides by a brick wall or a taped box on the floor, I know what to do, because I already thought about it in advance. So I built the framework out. And so I'm going to talk through what all that is and how it works for me and what I've seen and observed in others. Now, important point, these are just tools, right? These are my tools. I think they're meaningful. I think they're worth considering. Like, you got to find tools that work for you, that make sense for you. Now, for me, I've observed a lot of these same things in a lot of people I respect, which is how I've built up what I think that framework looks like. But the point is, have something. And don't wait until it's too late and you got to figure out what to do. Because here's what is definitely true. In our industry, forget personal stuff, because everyone has personal things, but in the industry that we've chosen, things always change. Transitions always happen. That's just how it is. And so if we aren't comfortable with that and we aren't ready to deal with that, we're going to have a lot of problems. Now, talk through, it's basically 4 things. 4 different elements, constructs of what I have in my mental framework for handling transitions in my life. First off, first thing I usually do is I reflect. I take a self-inventory. Sometimes literally. One of the first times I ever did this in my life was around the time I stopped practicing law. I'd been on a long trip with my wife and with friends, and we were in Costa Rica. I had this whole kind of epiphany, realized that there were some things I wasn't happy about. I came home about 2, 3, 4 nights after we got back to the States. I woke up in the middle of the night, literally in a cold sweat, got out of bed, went to the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror for an hour in the middle of the night. So sometimes we mean literally, right? I was searching, just trying to figure out where I'm at and what's going on. But it's got to be more than that. And over time I've decided it absolutely has to be more than that, because there's kind of a cliche, right? You hear people say, if you're not feeling great, look in the mirror and puff yourself up. Who's ever tried to do that? I mean, I try to do that all the time. It's going to be all right. I got it. I got this. I feel like I'm a kitten, but I see a lion looking back at me. It's going to be okay. You're tough. You got it. Okay. All right. Oftentimes, the reality is, this isn't it. It's very possible that, like, you're the lion. But because of the way we're feeling, because we feel stuck or trapped, don't know what to do, what you see, you think you're going to go puff yourself up, but actually you're just fine. You look in the mirror and you see this kitten looking back at you. It doesn't really help. Sometimes you see the lion, sometimes you see the cat. But one thing that I am very, very confident that you will never get when all you do is just try to look in the mirror, the one thing you'll never get is the truth. Never get the truth. Because the truth isn't about how we feel. The truth isn't about what's looking you back in the mirror. The truth is objective. The truth, right, is hard to find, but it's something that is universal. So how do you get that? Right? Because I think objectivity is really, really important. And I say that as someone who's a deeply emotional person. Like, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I have like emotional responses to everything. When we watch the movie tonight, I'm going to be like, find me, I will be crying the whole time, every time anything bad happens to any of the characters. Like, I'm an emotional person. I need to have an emotional response to the things I do in order to be effective. If I don't, on a day in and day out basis, I start to feel too clinical, and I actually don't do a good job in my life or in my work. But when I'm stuck, and when my emotions are negative, the feedback I give myself is pretty bad. So the first thing you got to do when you're stuck, or what I try to do, is I just ask the question, like, all right, what's next? This I actually got over time from Jay. Something goes wrong, all right, what's next? And what I mean by that is just sort of, what's happened has happened. I've had I've got this job, everything's fine, now my role is going away, I don't know what to do. Okay, what's next? Or I'm a lifelong SQL, DBA kind of person. Now I'm living in a world where I've got to worry about NoSQL databases and graph databases like Neo4j, all these things, and cloud stuff. Oh my God, am I irrelevant? What's happened? Okay, what's next? I'm a JavaScript developer. I really need to get good at jQuery. Wait, no, I need to be really good at Angular. Wait, no, React. Wait, Vue. Wait, okay, what's next? Oh, I was at the Southeastern Michigan JavaScript meetup, and I got a phone call, and my wife died. What am I going to do? What's next? So I get to those answers by literally asking myself questions, right? You got to just start interrogating yourself. I interrogate myself like, well, what has happened? You can't always answer these things. There may not be good answers, but you got to ask. Why is this going on? Where am I going to go and look for help? Who am I going to talk to who's been in similar situations that can get me through this thing, right? Like, how am I going to get there? How am I going to get from where I am now to where I need to be? And I try to start becoming objective about it. What I'll do, are there any designer UX type people here in the room, right? So I actually start to try to develop personas. I will develop personas around the situation I'm in and try to think, don't be me, put someone else in the red square and ask the questions for that person. And do it a few different times so I can start to try to think outside the box. I was joking before, I've got like this box. I'm going off camera, I want to be out here. Sometimes you just got to force yourself to think outside of it, right? Now, is that possible? Can we really step outside of ourselves? I don't know. But I try. And the reason I try is because once I've done that, and once I've really tried to ask myself these questions in a disconnected, objective way, what it enables me to do is start looking for helpers. Which is kind of the second component, if you will, of my mental framework. Look for the helpers. Who is like old enough and like grew up watching Mr. Rogers? Thank God. I've given this before. People look at me like, what is that sweater? And then I feel so old. So probably many of you maybe have seen the interview. He gave a very famous interview for like the TV Academy or something else. And he talks about the story when he was a child and he saw something that was scary on the news and he would be upset and nervous and his mother would say, it's okay, just look for the helpers. There are always people who are helping. Now, in that context, he was really talking about major tragedy, like first responders, firefighters, police. But the point is, in all things, there are always helpers, right? So what I try to look for, this is a quote from, there's a book by Mark Manson called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a word that I can't say on camera. Right, he says, if someone is better than you at something, chances are they failed at it more than you, right? So what you're looking for are the people who have actually failed. I try to find people who have tried to do this thing or get out of a situation and failed miserably at it, because I can learn from them, right? So what are we really talking about then? We're talking about people who we can learn from, who have tried and failed, who are the helpers. We're really talking about mentorship, right? And mentorship is at the core of kind of this second piece of my mental framework, and I would be nowhere in life without mentors. I don't mean a mentor or a few mentors. I mean, like, I think in this room I have 4. They're critical, right? Mentorship is meaningful, right, because you got to find the people who can help you get through the things. I think that it feels obvious, but sometimes mentorship doesn't necessarily mean, or doesn't have to mean, what we usually think of. Because a lot of times there are people who are mentors. There are people who are professional mentors, right? Life coaches and therapists and things like that who are mentoring you, or you build relationships over time in a very structured way, where you set up time on a calendar, and you go out and meet at a cafe, and you have some coffee, and you talk, and you have some give and take, and that's great. That's not wrong. But mentorship is a lot more than that. Take, for example, this event. One of my favorite parts of every conference is the hallway track. You just run into somebody and say, hey, let's chat. And you step aside, and you talk for a few minutes. It may be a friend that you see every other month at a conference. It may be someone you haven't seen in years. It may be someone you just met. But walk up and say hi to somebody. If it's someone new, a guy named Jeremy Clark, who talk about being a social developer, says, when you're at a conference, if you're feeling shy and introverted, which many of us are, when you're standing there in line at lunch, just say, hey, I'm Jeff. Who are you? What do you do? Tell me, where do you work? Simple question. What kind of work do you do? Ask questions. Sometimes you'll hear something and say, oh, I've been struggling with that. Hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And you go and you sit down, you have a little conversation. That's still mentorship. When you think about mentorship that way, then not to be a dead horse about the language and the words and taking ownership of an idea, but you realize that mentorship isn't anything special at all. Mentorship is really just a fancy word for relationships. That's it. They're just relationships. And what's great about relationships is when you stop thinking, I need to find a mentor to help me, or I love being in this mentoring relationship with this person, and you start saying, I love being in this relationship with this person, it opens up a lot of opportunity. Here's why. First off, you realize that relationships, I have lifelong relationships, right? I have relationships with people who I've been close to for nearly 40 years. But a relationship can last months, it can last weeks, it can last a moment. That conversation where I say, oh, you know what, I just overheard you guys talking, I want to talk to you about something. Can I talk to you for a few minutes? And you sit down in the hallway and talk to somebody, you might never see that person again. But in that moment, you were in a brief relationship with that person. When you realize that that's all mentorship really is finding those opportunities to have those kinds of relationships and meaningful dialogue with people, then mentorship becomes a lot more available and easy to find. The other thing about relationships is because relationships aren't as structured as what we sometimes think mentorship is, you realize that relationships are a two-way street. It's give and take. The best mentoring relationships that I'm in are relationships where the person who is mentoring me is also being mentored by me. A relationship. What that enables is something really special. One of the most important mentors in my life, in my whole life, is my son. He's 7. He is also extremely gifted with empathy. He is also mini-me. In all of the good ways and all of the bad ways, he's basically me in a slightly taller but continually growing package. And because of that, because he gets me, he cares about me, and he really understands who I am, and he cares about people a great deal, I go to him, or sometimes he just comes to me. There are days when he comes home, I'm already home, he walks in the door, I am all smiles. Hey man, welcome home, how was your day? He looks at me and says, what's wrong, Daddy? I was like, nothing's wrong. How was your day? What did you do? Trying to smile. And he's like, it's okay, Daddy. You can tell me what's wrong. I'm like, buddy, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I get this. Oh, okay. And I share with him. Now, he's 7, right? I don't dump the world's problems on his shoulders. But I share how I'm feeling. Or I share if something's bothering me. And what ends up happening is because he knows me well enough, and because of the relationship we have, He doesn't have to be the guru. He doesn't have to really understand this exact problem I'm having, whether it's with my work, my life, a problem I'm facing with, a stupid bug in my code. He doesn't have to understand that. He understands the feeling, and because he only has to understand the feeling, he can actually distill simple truths that help me get to where it is that I need to go. It's a very, very powerful thing for me. Let's go back to the wall for a second. Another pop culture reference for old people. Who grew up in like the late 70s to mid 80s? I love this crown. Okay. So who remembers what that thing is? Good. So like if you grew up in that time frame and you haven't seen Labyrinth, shame on you. It is like the greatest movie of my childhood. That and Never Ending Story. And Labyrinth, right, is this great movie. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's like a teenage Jennifer Connelly, a bunch of really weird Jim Henson puppets, David Bowie in so much spandex, and so much spandex. And he's like this goblin king who kidnaps Jennifer Connelly's baby brother. And she's stuck, and she's to get to the center of this maze and weave her way through this labyrinth and find her way out within like 24 hours, or she will lose her baby brother forever, right? And so early on in her journey, she finds herself literally facing a brick wall in like a corridor, and she looks as far as she can look that way, and all she sees is a hallway forever. And as far as she can go that way, I'm staying inside the box. As far as she can go that way, and she can't find a way out, and eventually she just sort of gives up. Now I know I'm off camera, I'm sorry. But she just sort of sits down and gives up. Am I on? Oh, close. I'll just stand. I tried. And she just gives up. She doesn't know what to do. And as she leans back against the wall, in that moment, she hears, hello. And she looks around and she sees that thing. It's a tiny little worm. And she starts talking to it. Oh my gosh, I'm stuck in this maze. Do you know the way out of the maze? Ew, me? Nah, I'm just a worm. And that's great, except then she goes, well, I don't know how to get out. And it says to her, well, there's an exit right in front of you. She says, no, there's not. But it turns out she stands up, she walks forward, and there's not actually a physical door, but because there's no really bad 80s special effects. She walks forward, and like sure enough, there's a way out right in front of her. It's like a mirage. But because she was able to just take a minute, stop, and listen, she found help in a brief relationship. You never see that little worm again. Presumably neither does she. But in that brief moment, in that brief relationship, she's able to find the way out to the next step to get where she was trying to get to go. That, and the door, brings us to sort of the third piece of this mental framework. Now, when you're presented with a door, when opportunity knocks, what do? Someone. What do you do when opportunity knocks? Answer the door. Yes. Open the door. I'm so bad at this. So bad. I'm pretty good at the first two. I'm pretty good. I've really gotten good at like the asking myself questions, trying to be objective, finding relationships, talking to people, all that. But then this comes about, and I am so bad at it. And I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of friends in my life throughout my life who cared about me, who tried to show me opportunities. So I look at this thing, and I say, what a lovely door you have there. And I walk this way. And I go, oh, it's okay. Then there's one over here too. That's nice. And I walk away. I'm freaked out. Now, I think there's a couple different reasons, and I don't think I'm alone in this, right? I think there's a couple reasons why. One potential reason is, what if I open the door, I walk in, I look around, and I find what I'm looking for, and I freak out. Now what? What's next? Right? So all of a sudden, I'm in this space, and I panic. I'm so used to looking and wanting to find the next thing. Right? That's one reason we get afraid. Or the other maybe a more obvious reason is, what if I open that door and there's nothing there? Well, so what? So what? Now, I'll take a minute and clarify something, because I've been given pushback on this particular thing a bunch. Because I say, well, when opportunity is there, don't be afraid to peek your head in and look around. What I often say, and I do mean this and I believe this, right? I'm not saying, like, dive in. I'm saying there's an opportunity here. Open the door, peek in, check it out, see if the opportunity is good for you. The door is not going to slam closed behind you, right? You're keeping one foot in the box still. And if it is going to slam shut on you, you probably know that already, right? And I believe all of that, but then the pushback I get is say, well, it sounds like you're telling everyone an opportunity comes and just quit your job. No, I'm not saying quit your job. Please don't go and all of you quit your job because you had a rough week, and they say, well, I saw Strauss gave this talk. I said, I had an opportunity, I should take it. That's not what I mean. And in fact, when I talk about opportunity, I don't mean, it's easy for us to hear opportunity as professionals and think job opportunity. That's not what I mean. When I say opportunity, I mean something much more abstract and universal. It might be a job. It might be, oh, you're stuck, have you read this thing? Check this out. Look at this book, it might be interesting. Or read this post. It might help you solve that problem you're stuck with, right? It might be a personal opportunity. Who knows? That's the kind of opportunity I mean, like, and it sounds silly to say, well, someone's going to give you a thing to read and just read it. You know, I'm bad at that. I'm so convinced that I'm stuck that someone says, well, just read this. And I say, okay. And then, like, I make up excuses for myself to not read the thing because I've already convinced myself I'm stuck anyway, I'm not smart enough to get out of this problem, and I don't even bother reading the thing to figure out how to do what it is I need to do. That's what I mean when I say, when opportunities are there, at least check it out. Okay? I'll give you a personal example. When I was like 18, I was like seriously clinically depressed. Like I was down. There's a lot of reasons for why and what was going on in my life, but I was, you know, I could not get out of the doldrums. I wouldn't leave my house. I wouldn't leave my basement. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I hated everyone. You all just are terrible people, and I never want to see any of you ever again. Like, that's how I felt. And my best friend since kindergarten was trying for days. He kept saying, dude, just come out, come hang out, do these things. I kept saying no, and finally he said, look, we're going to go see, who remembers Blues Traveler? Anyone? I loved Blues Traveler. They were in town, and the Wallflowers with, like, Bob Dylan's kid. Jacob, thank you. He was opening, they were opening up. I was like, that sounds interesting, right? But I don't know, I'm going to go. He's like, dude, just come. And I finally said, okay, let me think about it. He came over, he bought the tickets, said, just come with me. And I allowed myself to, like, say, okay, I'll try getting out and go and I'll come to see this show with you. I met my wife at that show. We've been together for 22 years. So sometimes small opportunities lead to big, big things. Sometimes you think you're trapped in this box, or you look in and say, well, there's nothing here for me. Well, not every single door is the thing that gets you to rainbows and sunshine and unicorns and kittens. But maybe you look around just long enough to say, is there another door down there? Okay, I think that seems good. Let's go that way and try it out. Or maybe there's not. Okay, like, you know, like the Homer Simpson thing where he, like, backs into the shrubs? Like, back up, close the door, go find your worm, find another door. It's okay. But when opportunities show up, don't be like her or be like me. Right? This is literally how I feel when someone says, try this. And I say, oh, that's so nice of you, but how am I going to do this? And I actually feel more stressed. No, don't do that. Like, when opportunity comes, welcome the opportunity. Welcome and be excited. Like, there's opportunities out there to solve the problems and the other thing that you're trying to get out of. Because maybe, just maybe, that opportunity is the thing that actually gets you to your goal. And speaking of goals, speaking of finish lines, that gets us to the fourth part of this little mental framework of mine. I'm going to go. I really date myself throughout this entire thing. I realize this over time. So back in what I think was 1988, the New York Giants, when I cared about football and the NFL mattered to me, I know I'm not supposed to say I don't care about football in this city, but I'm from St. Louis. We've lost 2 franchises, you know? So the New York Giants won the Super Bowl. And afterwards, they interviewed Phil Simms, who was the quarterback. They said, Phil Simms, you just won Super Bowl, whatever number it was. What are you going to do next? I'm going to Disney World. Now, he didn't just magically get to go to Disney World. And of course, Disney World at the time was a metaphor until over time they started actually bringing all these champions and paraded them down Main Street in Orlando. But like, it was a metaphor for achieving and reaching a goal, for getting to the actual mountain to where he was trying to get to. But that doesn't happen overnight, right? We don't just get there. We don't just walk out every morning and see Cinderella's castle. If we do, I want to live in your place. And so the reason he was able to do that, and the reason people who are super successful, I believe, are able to reach that point and get where they need to go, is because they keep this keen focus. This is also what I call the Disney portion of my talk. I didn't really intend that when I built the slides, and I realized there was a lot of Disney in it. I love Disney. So it's because he kept a keen focus on where it was that he needed to be all the time. Figured that out and never, ever lost sight. Never lost sight of where it was he needed to go. When you do that, you're able to objectively assess yourself better, ask better questions, find better relationships, figure out which opportunities are we peeking around and looking at, because he kept that keen laser focus on what it was he was trying to achieve. But you got to figure out what that is. Because, see, goals and purpose or meaning aren't the same. They're not the same. I don't feel like I really, truly appreciated or learned this until maybe 2 or so years ago, a year and a half ago. When I exited from Arana and stopped being a business owner. And I realized that, like, goals and purpose aren't the same. So think of it as, for me, I think of it as a distinction between tactics and strategy, right? There's tactical thinking. What are the steps? What do I need to do to get to this thing? And then there's, like, the strategy. What am I trying to solve for? What's the problem here? And so goals, for me, are things like, I want to be a business owner. I want to own a software consulting company. Okay. That at first sounds like that's the objective. But was it really? It turns out, no, maybe not. So I started asking myself, well, why? There's maybe a couple different reasons. I like the freedom, the independence, the ability to work when I want, where I want. Okay. Well, why? Well, I'm very deeply family. We already talked about my son, my wife. I have a daughter. Like, I'm very close to my family. I'm very family-oriented. I want and I need to be able to find ways to spend time at the right time with them. Okay, well, why? And you keep asking yourself, well, why? Well, why? Until eventually the answer is like, well, I don't know, because. Because if I can do that, then I'm who it is I want to be. Then I'm becoming the best version of myself, so to speak. I know it sounds very self-helpy. I'm sorry. But I think it is important, because when you do that, there's more than one goal, right? So, well, one, maybe I want the freedom and the flexibility to work where I want, when I want, all that. Maybe it's also, well, I want to feel like I've built something. I've built a legacy, or I've built a thing, right? Maybe there's that. Who knows? There's a lot of reasons. But when you start following down and asking yourself why on all of these things, what you start figuring out is there's a few different core bits that may be like, well, that's what actually matters. Now I found it. Now I found what matters. And when you do that, then there may be other means to get where you want to go. It's not that owning a business was wrong. It's that there are other ways and other intermediary goals or tactics to get me to what it is I'm really trying to achieve, trying to be where I will really feel like I'm doing the right thing. Whether that's for myself, for my family, for my community, whatever. One last Disney bit. Who's seen Inside Out? Who believes Inside Out is the single greatest movie, like, maybe ever made? I love this movie so much. So if you haven't seen it, right, like, the entire movie takes place inside the head, inside the brain of this little girl named Riley, and all these little fuzzy, glowy things are her emotions. It's obviously simplified, right? But, like, these are her emotions. There's anger and joy and sadness, fear and envy. And but what I want you to pay attention to is not those characters. It's those giant islands back behind, in the background. Because in that movie, that was like the purpose. I think what they called them in the movie was the islands of personality. Those were the things that made up who Riley was. And it's kind of a coming-of-age story, right, where this girl is entering her teenage years and she's going through change, and she has like all the things that teenagers do. They get angsty and difficult, and we don't like them. But like, it's because she's trying to figure out the actions she needed to take to satisfy those back things. That's the purpose. If you know what those are, you can make better decisions. And the other reason I use Inside Out as the metaphor for this is because in the movie, some of those come crumbling down. They literally collapse into the abyss. And new ones form. And that's normal. And that's okay, because even when I say, you ask, well, why, then you get to the, oh, there it is moment, the aha, that was the purpose. Well, that still changes. It's not immutable. And that's all right. It's just at any given moment or phase or part of your life, you need to be able to think, well, what are those things for me right now? And take the time to figure them out. Figure them out, you're going to end up in a better spot. So that's the framework. That's my framework. There are many like it, but this one is mine. The objective self-assessment and inventory, finding meaningful relationships so that you can actually have meaningful mentoring relationships, both giving and taking. Recognizing opportunities of all kinds and actually not running away from them, and then figuring out what that purpose is and keeping that keen focus and never losing sight of that. Now, I number these 1, 2, 3, 4, and I talk about them as if they're steps. They're not. One, because this isn't a 12-step thing, right? Or a 4-step thing. It's just an easy way to list them. But it doesn't really work like this. So I don't want to give the idea of like, well, first do this thing, and then once you've done this, you can go do that thing. Like, that's not how life really works, right? We can talk about having frameworks and steps, but really, this is a process, right? And sometimes it goes in a circle. Sometimes it weaves around and goes from step 1 to step 3 to step 2, right? I have a conversation. I have a brief relationship where I find some mentor. I hear a thing, and it triggers me to go back and say, I need to assess where I'm at. I need to think about some things. And then once I've done that, I realize there's an opportunity, right? You bounce around. Certainly, when you take the time to go through what I call the 4th step of the finding a purpose, finding what it is you're really trying to achieve, no question, you got to go back then and say, well, have I been doing the right things? Or have I made the right assessments? How am I going to break out of this thing that I feel stuck in? So it's not that it's steps, it's about a process, but really it's just about having the right tools. It's just having the right tools. And look, like, you can do that. And not only can you do it, I believe you must do it. I really do. And I don't mean you must do the specific things I'm talking about. I mean you must take the time when things are good to acknowledge that sometimes things won't be. Take the time to figure out, well, how am I going to approach those things when I'm stuck? Because, right, stuck is stuck, right? So if you wait until then, I got a brick wall on all 4 sides. It gets a lot harder, but if I know, right, if you know what it is you're going to do, you're going to have it easy. And so really, like, this transition is everywhere. What you want to do is, like, grow to love that. Grow to appreciate the transitions. Stop calling it adversity. Stop calling it hurdles. Stop calling it stumbling blocks. Oh, looks like I'm going to go through a transition now. And learn to appreciate and love that, right? Because it's not going to stop. Right? If you think that your professional life, your personal life, your day-to-day job, like we're no longer going to have transitions every day, in our lives, then like I would recommend going to step 1 and looking in the mirror. Right? It's going to happen, but if we learn to appreciate and love those transitions that move us towards those goals, move us towards that purpose, then you realize that sometimes, maybe eventually, that next transition that you've been fearing that comes can actually be the transition that gets you to the rainbows and unicorns, gets you to where it is you need to be right now at this phase of your life. And sometimes all that starts with a single spark. So, when you go through the rest of the day-to-day, we got a long day ahead of us and a long night watching all of our favorite characters die. And that wasn't I haven't seen it. I don't know. I'm just assuming that was, I don't know. Presumption. As we go through our day, And as you go through like your career and your life and you think about these things, right, be ready because this spark will come. And if you have the right tools, then the spark, instead of being like the spark that paralyzes you, instead of being the spark that causes the wildfire and causes everything to burn down to the ground around you, instead, you can make it the spark of creativity, of ingenuity, of inspiration that helps you to grow to become the best version of yourself. Enjoy your day, y'all. Thanks for listening.